Is the board clear? Is it okay from your end, Hades?
Yeah, the board's clear.
Good. So let's see. When Thursday is supposed to be, I believe, our quiz, and I have a quick question for the class. Given the fact that tomorrow is going to be a holiday, do you guys want it on Thursday or do you want to shift it to the next Thursday so that it wouldn't affect your holiday rest and all that? Do you prefer we holding it on this Thursday or do you prefer it's next Thursday or next Tuesday? Which one do you guys prefer? And I can go with that.
Most of the class is saying next Thursday.
Okay, so okay. How many so far, Alice?
How many what?
How many response so far?
Like
is it
15-ish?
And all?
10, 15.
Okay. So if that's the case, then I will just push it to next Thursday, and we might have it on next Thursday. But the only downside to that is you might have to have a busy weekend because you'll be preparing for your assignment, which is coming up hopefully this Tuesday, and you also have to prepare for the quiz at the same time. So I'm okay with pushing it to next Thursday so that you guys have enough rest for tomorrow. And yeah, that'll be that. And again, if you have questions for the last meeting and you want to ask, please let me know. Is it okay with everyone? If everyone is okay, then let's quickly start. Is there a question in there?
The question is, what is happening tomorrow?
Tomorrow is going to be a holiday, isn't it? Canada Day, right?
Yeah.
I don't want a situation where you'll be on the beach and you'll be thinking about a quiz coming up the following day. John, yeah, that's the reason why. So let's see how to go about today's. Do you have tutorial for tomorrow? No, it's a holiday, so there's no tutorial. You can join today's tutorial if you are okay with it. Is that okay with you? Is there any further question, Alice?
The quiz will have last week's material or this week or both?
I think it should be just last week, not this week. Yeah. Further more questions?
No other questions.
Okay, then let's quickly start with what we have for today. So you remember we were dealing with the raw intertemporal model from last week. And our assumptions there were pretty much very simple. Either you work to gain your income or you get your income automatically endowed to you. We are supposed to, our motive here is to try as much as possible as we move from chapter to chapter we try as much as possible to make the models more realistic to the real world situation. So in the previous model, the whole idea is you work, you get your income, but that's not what we see in the real world. In the real world, even if you get your income, there's supposed to be a mechanism that we use in getting you paid and getting you buy your stuff and getting you consume whatever you want to consume. And as you might have realized from your reading, this is where money comes to play. So from all what we've done so far, there wasn't money in there. Now we are going to introduce in the idea of money and how money can help us facilitate our model and make our model more realistic to the real world situation. So this is the whole idea behind chapter 12 for now. It has almost the same feature as chapter 11, but the new twist here is going to be the money. And with the money, we need to understand a couple of things as in what is the function of money. We define money, know its functions, get to know how it is measured. This I will leave for you guys to go read, the M1, M2, and all that. And then a couple of things we need to look at in terms of the types of the monetary system in terms of their liquidity and all that. Then we'll come back to the situation where we make it more realistic. So by getting to understand money from these 4 dimensions, then our life become easier moving forward. So we start by looking at what money is. We look at what the function is, and we look at its couple of measurements and see who issues money and what's not. So let's start by looking at the definition and the functions of money. Questions? Hardest?
None.
Okay. So before the introduction of money, what we had was the whole idea of the barter system, wherein if you need something, for instance, if you need an apple and you only have banana, you have to go in and find somebody who also needs your banana, and at the same time, he or she is willing to give you his or her apple. So this has been the whole idea of barter system, which was extremely difficult for us to execute. So difficult in the sense that you have to go find someone before you can execute your trade. Money comes in to help us in a couple of ways. First of all, it helps us execute our transaction in a very simple manner. And that's where we have the whole idea of medium of exchange. Unlike the barter system, where you have to have the double coincidence of wants. By double of coincidence of wants, this is where I cited an example of you having apples and wanting bananas, and you're going to find someone who needs to trade with you with the same type of situation. So because of the difficulty of the barter system, which led to difficulty in terms of the double coincidence of money, double coincidence of wants, money comes in as a medium of exchange to make our lives easier. So if I need apples, if I have money in my pocket, I can just go give the apple seller my money and I just get the apple. I don't necessarily have to go and find someone who has apples and willing to take my banana and what's not. So this has made the function of money pretty much easier for you. So that's the very first thing that we need to understand in terms of money, as in its function. The second function of money is the storage of value, as in how it helps us store value. So in the past, where we had no money, if for instance I had apples and I would like to store this apple for the future, I can't because I don't have any refrigerator. And even if I have a refrigerator, it might go waste. So I can't store my wealth if I don't have money. So the presence of money, I can just go sell my apples, keep money in my pocket, and it's not going to go waste. So the store of value property is coming from this whole idea that we don't necessarily have to hold anything tangible anymore that might go waste. And we can store our value as we work or as we go through a couple of things. Another function of money is unit of accounts. Having a basic thing that we all agree that this is how much I would like to pay you. There is no ambiguity as to the price of something. So if I come work for you, in the olden days, you might be willing to give me maybe 10 apples, and maybe 10 apples might not be the right measure. But now we have a standard measure that if I work for you for 1 hour, you give me $10. There's something that we can all, feel pretty much related to. So unit of account, something that's more related that we all agree upon as an account that make things easier for us. So there are a couple of functions as well, like deferment of payment and all that counts with money. And I believe you might have come across it in 103 or 102. So this is just a way of recap in terms of what money helps us to do compared to what the barter system had, which was very complicated for us. And we need to know these functions of money to understand the monetary intertemporal model that we are just about to tackle. Is there anyone with any question in there, Hardest?
No.
Okay. So having said that, this is just going to be part of our reading as we read and understand what money is. The next thing I would like to point out here is an idea that I believe we saw coming up, and that has to do with the interest rate. So bear with me here. So in this model, in this intertemporal model, there are a couple of things that you might be interested in holding: money, or you might be interested in holding bonds. So there are two things that we primarily pay attention to. Either we hold money because we have something to use in terms of our transaction, or we might be interested in holding bonds. That's another form of money, even though it's not as liquid as money is. So these two things are pretty much the two things that we hold as way of our transaction, or as way of storing something for the future. If you are interested in storing your money, you might be interested in buying a bond. So when you buy a bond, it comes with a value, which is an interest rate. Let's denote that interest rate as R, big R. So if I hold money, I have an interest rate that's being paid to me, which is a nominal interest rate. I buy my bond, I have this interest rate. So I have 1 plus R, which is the return that I get for holding the bond or buying the bond. When I hold money, technically, I don't have any interest that counts with it because it's just in my pocket. Unless I go to the bank and I tell the bank I would like to buy a bond, and they promise to pay me a certain percentage on the bond, that's where I get the interest. So this is the whole idea. When I hold money, it's just 1-to-1. But when I hold a bond, when I buy a bond, I get promised a certain amount of interest, which is big R. The next line of action is we need to understand the opportunity cost of holding money as against the cost of holding a bond. So let's imagine the situation that the prices of goods, which we saw, or this might be the first time seeing the prices. The prices of good in any market, let's assume that the prices is technically P. So if I hold money today, I can buy a certain good with it, which is P for today, and prices for tomorrow. Remember the notation for tomorrow is supposed to be P prime. When I decide not to use my money today and I shift it to bond and I go to buy bond, I get promised a certain interest rate, which is big R. But remember, this bond gets paid tomorrow. You don't get it till tomorrow because that's the decision that you make with the bank. So tomorrow, given this return, you can only buy goods at a certain prices, which comes with a notation P prime here as well, because these are the prices for tomorrow, and you get paid this return tomorrow. And these are the prices for today, and you get paid this return today. Is there anyone with any question in there, Harris, before we go ahead?
There's no question.
Okay. So if that's okay, then let's quickly see what we have here. My return, my relative return for holding money compared to holding bond, or the relative return for holding bond. If I hold the bond, I get paid P prime. If I hold this guy, I just get paid this. So what is my relative returns? Now this is going to be complicated, so make sure you stop me if it's not clear enough.
There's a question.
Sure.
Alex didn't get the 1 plus R P prime part. Can you explain that again?
Yeah, so let me quickly explain that part. So here, what I'm trying to put across is you have the situation where you can either go for bond or go for, I believe, money, right? For money, this is what you get. For money, if you hold money, you can decide to buy whatever you have for today, which is just P. For bond, you get paid this, but it comes at the price of this. So this guy here is the price that you pay for tomorrow. This guy here is the return that you get for the bond tomorrow. This guy here is the price that you get for the good today. And even if you go to tomorrow, there's not going to be any interest. So just leave this one as this. What I'm trying to put here is what will be the benefit of you holding money compared to the benefit of you holding bond, right? If you decide to hold bond, you get 1 plus R, correct? Sorry, Hades, was there a question?
Alex is saying, okay, so it's not 1 plus R times R prime, 1
No.
plus R times P prime?
No, not a multiplication. Sorry if you understood this as multiplication. It's not a multiplication. Is that okay, Alex?
Yeah, he says okay.
Okay, so I'm trying to see the benefit for holding bond compared to the benefit for holding money. If I decide to hold a bond, I get paid 1 plus R. But
There's another question.
Sure.
I was asking if P prime is equal to 1 plus R times P.
1 plus R times P. Let me see whether, say P prime equals, what was the question again? Can you repeat it? P prime equals?
P prime equals bracket 1 plus R bracket times P.
Oh, not now, no. Let's keep, no, for now. Let's keep it away from now, okay? Yeah.
Jean-Luc is asking, I think it's based on inflation rate?
Yeah, inflation rate. I'll count the inflation rate just after getting the relative returns from both. So let's keep inflation rate somewhere separate as well. For now, what I'm trying to do here is to compare the return for holding money compared to the return for holding a bond. Is that okay with everyone?
Yeah, thank you, okay.
Okay, sure. So for you to hold a bond, you get 1 plus R. But remember, it comes with the price of tomorrow. So if I have $100,000 as part of my return, and the prices happens to be maybe $100, I have to divide whatever I receive with the current prices that I have in the market to get the raw return for holding the money. The raw return for someone holding money here, remember, by holding money, you don't get any return. It's just 1 plus R, which is 0. All over the prices remember, there is no interest rate for holding money. All over the prices for today. So this is the return for holding money. And this is the return for holding a bond. So we have the two relative returns, and we are trying to compare how the two do play out and how they will help us determine what the raw interest rate is and what the most important equation here, which is a Fisher's equation, needs to be. So that's the whole argument. We have two types of assets that we can hold. Either we go with the money or we go with the bond. We want to see the return from holding the bond. Remember, the bond only pays after tomorrow or tomorrow, which means we need to divide it with P prime. And it comes with an interest rate of R. But money doesn't come with any interest. And by holding money, it means you are spending it today. You don't care about saving. So you pay the prices of today only. So this is the raw return for money here. So we now have this equation that will help us determine the Fisher's equation. So I'm going to go ahead and introducing the inflation as John pointed out, and introducing a couple of important factors as well. Questions in there, Hardest?
None.
Okay. To make our lives easier, we denote this relativity in terms of bond and money as 1 plus R, the real return. 1 plus the real return for holding the bond. This guy is kind of weird, so let me just. So let's label this guy here as 1 plus R for the time. The next line of action is to talk about what an inflation is. And we are going to come back to this equation very soon. Remember, inflation happens to be the change in price, the prices between today and tomorrow. And we know the formula to get the changes in anything. From what we saw, the change in anything is current minus past all over past, or future minus current all over future, all over current. So you can use this equation. So to get the inflation rate of anything at all, in terms of the prices, let's label the inflation rate just like what we saw in the book as I. And it's going to be the prices, the current prices or the future prices minus the past prices or today's prices all over today's prices. Now this is going to be the inflation rate that we have. Is that okay for everyone? So inflation, remember, represent the changes in prices. And we now have a formula that will help us understand what an inflation rate is. So I have inflation rate, I have the relative return of bond to money. I can now do one or two manipulations to combine this R and this I. And that's my motive for now. And that's what's going to give us the Fisher's equation. So let's see how that works out. This equation here, if you don't mind, let me quickly change it a bit. It's the same thing, nothing is going to change. It's just going to be the same. 1 plus big R all over P prime divided by 1 over P. This is the same as P by this.
There's a question.
Sure, feel free.
I haven't understood how for the bond we cater for the principal amount that you can get back after the bond matures.
You said? Sorry?
I haven't understood how for the bond we cater for the principal amount that you can get back after the bond matures.
Sorry, I didn't get it. If your question is where is the principal, then the principal is basically taken to unity, right? It's just one. It doesn't really matter as to the amount of principal that you have here. Regardless of the principal, if you have to put the principal here, it's the same amount of principal that you might have in today's money holding, and they'll cancel out, if that's your question. So it's just easy for us to put the principal to 1 and life is easier. But I don't know whether that was a question.
She said okay.
Okay, yeah. So if you understand, yeah, if I'm to understand your question properly, what she's trying to ask here is for any bond, if you buy a bond, you get a return 1 plus R. But you might go to the bank and tell the bank that, hey, I want to buy a bond that is worth $100. So this is the principal. And that's correct. But the whole idea here is the same principal, $100, could have been the same principal that you had in your pocket today. And it's the same principal that you could have spent consuming today. So this 100, P prime here, C, length, you see they will cancel out. It doesn't really matter which principal that you have. They will just cancel out. So we just normalize it to 1 to make our lives easier. Yeah, okay, good. So let's quickly go ahead and see what we have here. So I have this guy here. Remember, this guy can be moved to this side. This is going to be P prime, and this is just 1. The question here is, what will be P over P prime, if I'm right? So I have this guy here. I can manipulate it in a way that I will get P over P prime. This is the same as P prime over P minus P over P, which is 1. So I have I plus 1 equals P prime over P. So here, if I turn it upside down, I now have P over P prime to be the same as 1 over 1 plus I. Is that okay for everyone? So P over P prime is the same as what we have here, which is the same as 1 plus I, which will give us this equation. So I will end up with big R, 1 plus big R, all over 1 plus I equals 1 plus R. Now, this is how we try as much as possible to approach the Fisher's equation. Is that okay with everyone? So remember, what we did here was to start by looking at the relative demand, the relative return for holding a bond compared to holding paper money. Then we define what an inflation is. And by looking at the inflation, we were able to derive 1 plus I, put it back to the relative return equation, and we have this equation here to work for us. So if this equation is understood and everyone is on the same page, then let's quickly finish it up by looking at what the Fisher's equation is. So I believe if you do the math, you end up with R equals, let me quickly write it down without wasting much time. Big R, the ones will cancel out, minus I minus IR. So the real return equals the nominal return for holding the bond minus the inflation rate that we saw from the inflation formula minus the inflation rate multiplied by the real return. The good news here is our life is now easier because in the real world, inflation rate and real return are technically small. They are very small in nature. And given that they are small and they are all multiplying each other, we can technically put them to 0. So we have a situation where our real interest rate equals the nominal interest rate minus the inflation. And this is what we call the Fisher's equation. So we set this guy to 0. We now have this guy being approximately the same thing as nominal minus the inflation. So we have Fisher's equation for us. Is there anyone with any question in there?
There's no questions. Okay,
so this will be the major equation for us starting, and it was going to take much of our time, but I think it's relevant. We get to know how to derive it. And maybe there might be changes in there, and you might want to keep an eye on it as in how we derived it and see how it's going to work out. Now, having said that, our next line of action is to look at the methods of payment, right? Before that, if you happen to be in the chat room, write your full name and write yes, and let's see where to go from there. Just write your full name and write present. Sorry, full name and write present. Are you all done? If you are done, then we can go ahead. Are we still typing, Alice? Alice?
Yeah, some people are still typing.
Okay, sure. No, wait for them then. The next line of action here is to look at the means of payments, right? So here, we just looked at the two types of assets that we might have in any monetary system, be it bond or be it cash. Now here, we are interested in understanding the means of payment. You can go to the bank, or you can see a colleague and you're interested in buying something, you can give the colleague cash and that's the end of the business. But if you don't have money with you, as part of the functions that we realize that money can have is a means of deferred payment. Either you promise the person that, hey, I'm going to pay you probably in the next week or two. But if the person doesn't trust you, you're not going to have it. So here, the means of payments here is, in addition to the one that we know already, be it cash, we also have a credit system that's being given to us, either from our banks or from any credit institution. So credit is going to be very important in understanding how this system works. So either we go with currency, hardcore currency, which is cash, or either the bank stands in for us and gives us a Visa card or a MasterCard to help us transact our business. For cash, it's easier for us to understand how it works. For the credit card, we need to understand how it's being supplied to us by the banks and what comes to play whenever they are interested in giving us credit. So for the means of payments, cash and credit. But let's look at the supply side of the credit, which is very important as of now. So I'm going to cancel this guy and understand where the credit system comes in. So as we all realize, credit comes from the bank. They have a supply system. They look at the fees that comes with the credit card that they give or they supply. Whenever the fees is high, what happens to their supply? Anyone to help me to their credit supply? What happens to their supply of credit? Whenever the credit charge fees are high, what do we think banks do? Are they interested in giving us more credit or less credit? Yeah, they might be interested in giving us more credit, right? It goes up. So we have this relationship that captures the relationship between the prices that the banks are willing to charge for the fees and the supply they are willing to have as well. So the higher the price or the credit card fees, the higher the supply. Now the next line of action is to, so we are done with the supply side of credit. Now let's look at the demand side. And this is going to be very interesting. So let's play around with it. So for demand for credit, the household has a decision to make. It has a benefit and cost analysis that it makes. The benefit comes from the fact that when you go for credit, there might be some benefit that comes with it. The cost, the same thing. When I go for credit, the cost that comes with it is the fees that I pay for it, which is Q, or 1 plus the fees that they pay, they charge me. So at the end of the day, if I borrow $10, they might charge me an interest rate of 5%, which is like the Q, and I'll come back and pay maybe $10 with an extra $1 for the fee. So that's the cost that comes from me borrowing from them. Now, what about the benefits? The benefit is that if I decide to keep the money with me, I have money with me, I know for sure I could have used my money, but I went for the credit. The money I have in my pocket, I can take it to the bank, tell the bank that, hey, I would like to buy a bond. And when I buy the bond is going to give me an interest rate which is big R, and it's going to be 1 plus R.
There's a question.
Sure, feel free,
Is
sorry.
Q the same as nominal interest rate?
Which is that? Which one? Sorry.
Is Q the same as nominal interest rate?
Exactly, the nominal interest rate that you get from holding the bond. Yeah. Any other questions?
No other questions.
Okay. And here, the prices are just the same. It doesn't really matter, be the principal or anything. So I'm just going to keep away the P that you guys see in the textbook.
There's another question now.
Sure.
So the cost is 1 plus Q because you're paying to the credit card balance and the fees for the credit card? Yeah.
So if you take $100 from the credit card, they'll tell you, hey, at the end of the month, we are going to charge you $10 we are going to charge you maybe 10% for taking the credit, right? So you go there, give them the $10 that you borrowed originally, plus the additional $1 in terms of the percentage. Is that okay, John?
Alex has another question.
Sure, yeah.
Why do we use different notations like R and Q? Can we use the same?
No, it will be different, right? Because the credit card company, the cost that they charge you is different from the interest rate that you get from holding a bond. These are two different markets, and they have two different rates that they charge. Yeah.
So Q is not R.
Exactly. Q is not R. Q is coming from the credit card market. How much they decide to charge you is left for them to charge you. And R is coming from the either the bond market or any issuance market, right? So an example is, imagine a situation where you happen to be someone who is so much, you have a very good credit score. Your Q is technically going to be different from everyone, right? But if you go to the bond market, it doesn't matter what your credit score is. The R is the same R that they give you, right?
So we are using credit to buy the bond?
You might want to think of it that way, but the easiest way to think of it is you have cash with you, and you can use this cash to go buy something. Or you can decide to keep the cash away, use it to buy a bond, get an interest rate R. And instead of buying the good with the cash, you just go use your credit card and buy the good with a credit card, knowing very well you're going to pay an interest on it. Think of it along that line. Who has the mic on? Yeah.
There's another question.
Sure, feel free.
Okay, so we are not considering the lending rate to be the same as the borrowing rate?
Yeah. We are not. We have to determine our equilibrium as of now. We have to determine our equilibrium as of now. So when we determine our equilibrium, that will be the point where the two will be the same. But from the start, it's not the same. We have to make a couple of decisions before we determine whether they are the same or not. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah. So with my money, I can buy bond and get interest and put it somewhere safe and go and borrow to consume today, knowing very well I'm going to pay Q. When I get my return on my bond, I can come and pay back this interest. Couple of decisions that you have to make. First, what happens to your decision? Would you go for credit, or would you use your money if we have this? Anyone to help us? Would you go for credit card, or would you go for bond? Anyone in there with this equation, with this sign I just placed in there? You go for credit. Yeah, you go for credit card, because when you buy bond, you have a much higher return. With this additional return, you can go and pay back what you've borrowed. So you go for credit card. Is that okay with everyone? If it's not, please draw my attention. Questions?
There's no questions.
Good. If we have the opposite, then it means that when you go to the credit card, they are charging you extremely high. You go like, hey, I don't want your credit anymore. I was supposed to go in and buy bond with my money. By giving this high interest rate, I cannot borrow from you. I'll just go use my money and use it for spending instead of buying the bond. So when it's this way, you rather just go buy from your cash without borrowing. So this is the decision that you make. Questions?
There's no questions.
Okay. And the final point will be the point where the two of them are the same. So you can see that you are really making a decision at a margin. You're not making a decision as to whether you want to go with 2% of this and 8% of that or whatnot. Whenever the equation is not the same, you are really caught up between the two. Either you go for all cash or for all credit. The only point where you'll be indifferent between a credit and using a cash is the point where these two are the same. That's technically to say the point where R is the same as Q. And this will be the point where your demand for credit is the same as your demand for cash. So we now know your supply. We now know the supply from the banks. You as an individual, we now know your demand decision, which is the point where R is the same as Q. And this is Q. So we come here, find a point where R is the same as the Q. And remember, it's just going to be a straight line. So we now have your demand for credit, which is X of D as a function of Q. And we know your supply from the credit market. And this will be the equilibrium point, which determines the equilibrium supply. Questions?
This is the questions
we have in the market. So just know how we derive the supply, how we derive the demand, and what went into it. Okay. So let's quickly see what we just finished doing. I'm going to leave this guy here. Can you see from here? I'm trying to put up something up here. Let me know whether you see from there or not. Okay. Where's my mark? So your demand for money, whether you use money or not, depends on a couple of factors. The very first thing is P, and I'll come and explain that shortly, and Y minus X as a function of R. This is going to be an important equation. So as individuals, we demand money based on a couple of things. When prices in the economy happens to be extremely high, our demand for money, which is money demand, can you see from there, Hadas?
We can see.
Okay. When the prices happens to be high, then our demand for money needs to be high. A situation is, imagine you go to Tim Hortons today, you had only $10 with you, but the donut that you used to buy for $10 is now $20. When you are coming back tomorrow, are you going to hold more money with you or less money?
More money.
Exactly, more money. So as the prices increase in the system, demand for money will also increase in the system. That's the very first thing. The next thing we need to understand is Y, which is more or less like the output in the economy or the GDP or what's not. So when the GDP in the economy increases, our demand for money also increases in the economy. Now, this is going to be the tricky one. This is going to be the tricky one. This is our entire demand. This is the demand coming from either credit or what's not. And there's supposed to be the part of it that comes from cash. So there's a need for us to differentiate which part of it are we going to use our cash in buying and which part of it are we going to use our money in buying. Please, if you happen to be around, it's now 11:16. Please write your name and let's see. Write your name and write present. Sorry. It's almost time. Is everyone okay in there? Have you written their names? Hades? Hades?
People I think are still writing.
Okay, sure. Then I'll just wait for some few seconds.
There's a question.
Sure.
What is the difference between demand for currency and money demand?
It's the same, unless you talk about credit, which is different. Currency is the same as money.
And why is there two equations?
Yeah, I wanted to point out something different. I wanted to point in the fact that there might be credits coming in. So there's a need for us to pay attention. Yeah. You can put this P here, you end up with this, right? Alice, if you put this P down here, the equation just becomes this. So there's nothing that I've done so different. So this might be the real demand, right? So I might want to put a real demand here because I'm putting the P here. But I just want it to be much clearer, right?
Okay.
Yeah. The question here is, remember you make a decision whether to use money or to use credit. And money, I mean cash. What happens to your decision if interest rate on holding bonds is extremely high? What we saw earlier. What happens to our decision for using money if the interest rate for holding bonds are very high? Are we going to still use money or are we going to use money less? Exactly. We will use less of the money.
Use less money?
Yeah, because in that case, we rather use all our money and go buy bond so that we get the higher interest. We can afford to borrow and consume with the borrowing. And when our return comes in, which we are promised is going to be very high, we can use the return and pay the credit. So when the interest rate for holding bonds happens to be extremely high, our demand for money is going to go down because we buy more of the bond. That's what I wanted to point out here. When our GDP is high, income of everybody is going to increase. As income of everybody increases, the amount of money that people have in their pockets is also equally going to increase. That is what we just finished analyzing. So there are three things we need to keep in mind whenever we talk about money demand. What happens to our demand for money if prices increase? We did that. What happens to our demand for money if our income or GDP increases? We just finished doing that. What happens to our demand for money if the nominal interest rate on bonds increases? We just finished doing that. So as this guy goes up, which is the last one, this guy comes down. So these are the...
There's a question.
Sure.
X bracket R bracket, is it real demand for bonds?
Yeah, demand. You might want to call it that. Demand for bond. because it's just the opposite of you holding money. Because if you're not holding the money, you are using the money on bonds. So they are just the opposite of each other. Is that okay? Whose question was that?
That was Alex, and he said that's okay.
Yeah, it's just the opposite of each other. So if you know what you are using your money for, you technically know the amount of bond that you are holding. Remember, we have two assets in the system. Either you hold money or you hold bond. Okay. So let's finish this up and let's see what we have here. So we are now done with the money demand. Let's go back to our equation and let's see what we have here. So I'm just going to draw one of the equations that we had and see what we have here, right? So remember, we have this guy here. We have the supply. We have the demand, which happens to be here. What you're going to do here is what happens to this entire thing. Remember, this is R1, which is the same as Q, and we have Q here. This is where we have our supply, equilibrium supply. What happens to this guy when R increases? There's a question?
Yeah, so XR wouldn't be equilibrium for credit services?
No, it depends on what the R is. So if at the end of the day, we determine what the R is, then we know the amount of transaction that goes with cash and the amount of transaction that goes with credit. Remember, again, this Y here, this is the amount of income or the amount of output or the amount of anything that we have in the system. Part of it counts with credit and part of it counts with cash. So if we know the amount that counts with cash, we automatically know the amount that we use our credit for. Right? The income is given. If I know X of R, I automatically know X that counts with Q, small q.
But which does XR represent?
Which does XR represent? XR represents, for the sake of consistency, XR represents the demand that counts on the credit side, if that works.
So not cash or credit?
Not necessarily, yeah. Because remember, the Y minus the X will give us the money demand, which is the currency demand, right? Y minus X of R give us the currency demand. So automatically the X of R will give us. So that's a good question. Let me quickly point it out before, I don't think I'll work this guy out. So coming to John Luke's question. John, this is what we had M, which is a function of P, which is a function of Y minus X of R. This is the demand for money, right? This is demand for currency, right? Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to divide this guy by P. It doesn't change anything. It's still the demand for currency or the demand for cash, but in real terms. Is that okay, John Luke? Is that okay?
XR is the currency demanded?
Exactly. So this M over D will give us the demand. So if this is the case, then I can equally say that the M over D, this is the part that counts with cash, plus X of R. This is the part that counts on credit, and this is the entire output. So I'm interested in buying this good. I'll use cash, I'll use credit, and I get it. Yeah.
Real money demand plus real bond demand equals Y?
Yeah. What I'm trying to do here is to use the equation that we saw, right? So go back to equation 12.6. Just to make our lives easier. Go to equation 12.6. Is that okay? So equation 12.6, I'm just trying to use that to make our lives easier.
So is XR real bond demand and real credit demand?
Yeah. Yeah, because this guy is also good, right? This is real good. So I have the real money demand. I have the demand in terms of credit, be it real, and I have the output, which is also real as well. So if you want to see which one is which, then I think equation 12.6, when we spread it out this way, we see which one of the good is coming from which other. Questions?
John Luke says, because you substitute credit in order to buy bonds, is that the reason why?
I don't want to think of it that way as of now, but it might be. I probably have to think of it a bit further. It might be, yeah. Questions?
No other questions.
Okay. So if there are questions, just let me know. I'll keep it here. I think we are almost, yeah, I think it's just okay. I'll have a look at it, see ways to make it much simpler. But the most important thing is get to know your transaction, your entire transaction, which is why you can use cash for it or you can use credit for it. If you use cash for it, this is what you have. If you use credit for it, this is what you have. And this is the final part. And again, as we pointed out, the confusion might be coming from the fact that this guy is raw demand, but there's no division of P in here. That makes this guy a raw credit demand as well. But if you look at equation 12.6, the P is in front and they've given us the entire equation, unless of course it's a different equation. If we are consistent with the equation, then we can just pull the P back here, pull this guy here and see which side of the transaction counts with cash and which side counts with credit. Questions?
There's no other questions.
Okay. I think someone with the name Huawei raised the hand. Okay. If there are no questions, Thursday there's not going to be midterm. I'll try and then finish this chapter. Then we'll go ahead and start with chapter 13, I believe. See where the dynamics are coming from. So in the sense of any question, please let's meet on Thursday. And you can join any tutorial for this week because tomorrow there might not be tutorials. See you guys. Bye.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.